The first thing you notice on the highway isn't the silence. It's the absence of motion. Cars are stretched across all 6 lanes, nose to tail, their windows reflecting the last trace of daylight. Headlights remain frozen in a scattered line, 100 white beams piercing through a haze of smoke and dust. At first glance, it could be mistaken for a traffic jam, the kind you curse on your way home from work. But then you realize, the engines aren't running. The people aren't moving. And the silence, it isn't peaceful. It's suffocating, like the air itself is holding its breath. I was one of the unlucky few still alive, still conscious, still thinking. My name doesn't matter right now, but know this, I never believed the stories. Not the rumors of infection spreading overseas, not the headlines calling it the rising sickness. Even when the first clips leaked, shaky phone recordings of people tearing into each other's flesh, I dismissed them as hoaxes. Because things like that don't happen here. Not on our streets. Not in our cities. And certainly not on a highway I had driven 1,000 times before. But on that night, as the red glow of taillights bathed the asphalt, I realized the nightmare wasn't knocking on our door anymore. It had already let itself inside. It began with the car behind me. I remember gripping the wheel, trying to peer ahead through the lines of trapped vehicles, when the sharp crack of glass breaking split the silence. I twisted in my seat just in time to see movement, a figure clawing at the windshield from inside the car. The glass spiderwebbed, the driver trapped inside pounding helplessly as something pressed against him from the back seat. At first, I thought it was a carjacking. A robbery gone wrong. But then the glass shattered completely, and the thing inside lunged forward, dragging the driver's face back into the darkness of his own car. The sound that followed was unmistakable. Wet tearing. A muffled scream that broke too quickly. Blood sprayed across the shattered glass like crimson paint. My heart slammed against my ribs. I ducked instinctively, pressing myself low against the steering wheel as if invisibility was an option. The world was unraveling in slow motion, and my mind was screaming at me to start the car, to drive, to do something. But that's when I realized I couldn't. My engine had gone silent nearly 30 minutes earlier. Just like every other car around me. A dead highway. Thousands of people stranded. And now, whatever that thing was, it was loose. Movement rippled across the jam like wind across tall grass. Doors creaked open in the distance. Shadows lurched between vehicles. Some people screamed, others ran, weaving between cars, desperate to break free of the endless line of metal and asphalt. But there was nowhere to go. The highway stretched for miles, sealed on either side by tall sound barriers. We were rats in a trap. The infected, or the dead, or whatever name you want to give them, were already spreading. They moved unnaturally, their heads jerking as though their bones had forgotten how to bend properly. Their skin was pale, torn in places, with black veins pulsing beneath. And their eyes, not the hollow, milky white ones you see in movies. No. These eyes were bloodshot, feverish, brimming with hunger. I remember the moment one of them noticed me. It was standing on the hood of a car just a few vehicles behind mine. Its jaw hung at a crooked angle, flesh dangling from its lips like shredded fabric. It tilted its head, sniffing the air like a predator catching a scent. Then it leapt down, landing on all fours before snapping its gaze toward me. My blood turned to ice. I sank lower, praying it would lose interest. But praying wasn't enough. The first scream came from a woman only a few cars away. She bolted from her vehicle, clutching her child's hand, running down the narrow strip of asphalt between lanes. For a split second, I thought she might make it. But the infected are fast. Too fast. The creature that had seen me lunged instead for her. It caught her by the shoulder, jerking her backward with such force that her child slipped from her grip. The kid's cry still echoes in my head, high-pitched and desperate, as his mother was pulled down onto the hood of a nearby car. What happened next is something I will never forget. The creature tore into her throat, blood spraying across the windshield, painting the glass in streaks of black-red under the headlights. Her scream turned to a gargle, then silence. The boy stood frozen, his tiny hands trembling as the world he knew ended before his eyes. And then the infected looked up again, lips slick with blood, and spotted him. I wanted to move. I wanted to open my door, grab the boy, do something. But I didn't. My hands locked around the wheel, my body paralyzed by terror. I watched as the boy turned and ran, his small frame darting between cars. The infected followed, crawling over hoods, smashing glass as it gave chase. His screams carried into the night until they were cut off. Just like that. That was when I knew. No one was getting off this highway alive. The smell of blood thickened in the air, mixing with exhaust and burning rubber. Somewhere down the line, a car had caught fire, flames licking into the sky, throwing everything into a hellish glow. The infected seemed to thrive in the chaos, their shrieks bouncing off the barriers, each sound twisting deeper into my skull. I forced myself to move, my legs trembling as I unlocked the door. Staying inside my car meant waiting for death to break through the glass. I needed to find higher ground. A vantage point. Somewhere I could see without being seen. The roof of a nearby SUV became my target. I crept from my sedan, crouching low, every sound amplified in the suffocating quiet between screams. My shoes scuffed against the asphalt, and I winced at the noise. Every step felt like a gamble with death. When I finally reached the SUV, I climbed onto its bumper, gripping the roof rack, and hauled myself upward. From that height, I saw the nightmare fully. The highway stretched endlessly, a frozen river of steel and broken humanity. Fires burned in pockets, sending pillars of smoke into the night. Infected swarmed between cars like ants, dragging people from their hiding spots, tearing into them with unrelenting hunger. And above it all, the city skyline glowed faintly in the distance, untouched, unaware, or maybe already gone. There was no order, no rescue, no escape, just the slow, inevitable collapse of everything. I spotted a group, a handful of survivors about 10 cars ahead. They had armed themselves with whatever they could find, tire irons, broken glass, even a baseball bat. They moved together, covering each other's backs, fighting their way down the narrow lane. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, if I joined them we could push forward. Maybe we could find an opening in the barriers, a way off this highway. But as I prepared to climb down, a sound froze me in place. A low, guttural growl, so close it vibrated through the metal beneath me. I turned my head slowly, and there it was, crouched on the roof of the car just behind mine. Its hands were bent into claws, nails digging into the paint. Its jaw snapped open and shut as if testing the air, and its eyes locked onto me with feral intensity. The distance between us was less than 10 feet. My breath caught in my throat. My muscles screamed at me to move, to leap down, to run. But the creature tilted its head again, and this time it smiled. A smile too human, too deliberate. And that's when I realized, not all of them were mindless. Some remembered. The creature's grin was the kind of expression that doesn't belong on a corpse. Its lips twitched with intention, as though some shred of humanity remained, not in mercy, but in mockery. For a second, it didn't pounce. It simply crouched there, muscles coiled, eyes locked with mine. The flames flickering in the distance reflected in its gaze, and I felt like I was staring into the eyes of something that understood the hunt. I didn't think, I jumped. The roof rattled beneath me as I pushed off, crashing down onto the hood of the SUV with a heavy thud. My ankle twisted on impact, but pain was a luxury I couldn't afford. I scrambled across the metal, sliding down the windshield just as the creature lunged. Its claws raked across the roof where I'd been seconds before, the shriek of metal tearing echoing across the highway. I hit the ground hard, knees scraping against asphalt. The creature landed behind me, snarling, its breath wet and rancid. My body screamed for me to keep moving, and I obeyed. I sprinted between the jammed cars, ducking behind open doors, weaving through shattered glass, heart hammering so loud it felt like the infected must hear it too. Somewhere ahead, I could still see the survivors. They were moving faster now, trying to push their way forward before the swarm closed in completely. If I didn't catch up to them, I wouldn't last long. The air was thick with smoke. A car a few lanes away had fully ignited, flames spilling across the asphalt. The heat licked my skin, a cruel reminder that fire wasn't the only thing that burned here. Fear did too, hot and choking. I ducked behind a truck and dared a glance back. The creature was following, but slower now, as if savoring the chase. It crawled along the hoods of vehicles, its body jerking in unnatural motions, but its gaze never left me. That smile, It was still there, splitting its torn lips into something far too deliberate. I forced my legs to move faster. Ahead, the group of survivors had reached a delivery van and were breaking into it, prying open the back with makeshift weapons. They needed cover, and so did I. "Wait!" I shouted, my voice cracking. 3 heads whipped around. A man in a blood-streaked flannel shirt gripped the baseball bat, narrowing his eyes at me. For a second, I thought he'd leave me behind, but then he swung the bat down hard, knocking the lock loose from the van's back doors. "Get in!" he barked. I bolted forward, the creature closing in behind me. Its shriek sliced through the chaos, a sound that made my blood curdle. I dove into the van just as the man yanked the doors shut. The clang of metal locking into place rang like salvation. Darkness swallowed us inside, broken only by the faint glow of the burning cars outside. My breath came in ragged gasps, the silence between each inhale filled with the pounding of my heart. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't alone. There were 5 of them. The man in the flannel, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. A woman with dirt streaking her face and a knife clutched in her trembling hand. A younger guy, barely out of his teens, his wide eyes darting nervously. An older woman clutching a first aid kit like it was a lifeline. And a girl, maybe 13, sitting silently in the corner, her knees hugged to her chest, her gaze fixed on nothing. They looked at me like I was a stranger intruding on their fragile bubble of survival. The man spoke first. "You brought it right to us." "I didn't," my voice cracked, still raw from the chase. "It was already coming this way." "You saw it," the younger guy muttered. "It was after you." The woman with the knife cut him a sharp glance. "Shut up, Darren." Flannel Man leaned closer, his eyes searching mine, calculating. "What's your name?" I hesitated. Names felt useless now, as if the world beyond this highway didn't exist anymore. But something in his stare demanded an answer. "Ethan," I said finally. He nodded once. "Rick." Introductions ended there. We didn't need pleasantries. Survival was the only language left. The silence stretched, broken only by the muffled sounds outside, the scrape of claws against metal, the shrieks of the infected as they prowled between cars. The little girl flinched at every sound, her small hands trembling. The older woman wrapped an arm around her shoulders, whispering something soft, though I couldn't hear the words. Rick adjusted his grip on the bat. "We can't stay here long. Once they realize we're inside, they'll tear this van apart." I swallowed hard. "Where do you plan on going?" "We're boxed in." "The barriers." "We'll find a way," Rick cut me off. His tone was sharp, but beneath it, I sensed something else. Desperation. The woman with the knife, her name, I would later learn, was Lila, leaned forward. "You saw it, didn't you?" Her eyes locked on me, intense. "The one that was chasing you." My throat tightened. The image of its crooked grin burned in my mind. "Yeah, I saw it." "They're changing," she whispered. "Not all of them. But some. They remember." The van went quiet. Even the girl seemed to pull herself back into reality, her wide eyes shifting toward Lila. Rick finally spoke, his jaw tight. "Doesn't matter what they remember. Dead is dead. We keep moving, we stay alive." But I wasn't so sure. Because if the infected could remember, even fragments of what they once were, then maybe they weren't just hunting us. Maybe they were playing with us. A sudden crash against the van made everyone flinch. The walls rattled as claws scraped along the outside. The little girl whimpered, and Rick pressed a finger to his lips, motioning for silence. We all held our breath, the darkness pressing down heavier with every passing second. Then came the voice. Faint, raspy, warped. "Ethan." My stomach dropped. It was outside. The creature. Calling my name. The others looked at me, horror spreading across their faces as the voice repeated, louder this time. "Ethan." The sound was wrong, too human, too deliberate, but broken, as though each syllable scraped across vocal cords that shouldn't function anymore. My chest tightened, air burning in my lungs. "How the hell does it know your name?" Darren whispered, his words sharp with fear. I don't know," I stammered. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Had I said my name too loudly when I introduced myself? Could it have heard? Or was it something else entirely? The scraping moved along the side of the van, the sound of nails dragging slowly across metal. The voice followed. Come out, Ethan. Rick's knuckles turned white on the bat. It's baiting us. No, Lila whispered. Her voice trembled. It's taunting him. The infected outside grew restless, pounding on nearby cars, their shrieks rising into the night. The van shook again as something slammed against the back doors, hard enough to bend the metal inward. We can't stay, Rick hissed. He moved quickly, sliding toward the front of the van and peering through the cracked windshield. Flames reflected in his eyes. We make a break for it. Stick together. Stay low. Are you insane? Darren's voice cracked. There are hundreds out there. Better than waiting here to be torn apart. Rick's tone silenced him. The plan was madness, but he was right. Staying meant death. Moving, at least gave us a chance. Rick reached for the latch, his muscles tensing. On 3. I swallowed, my heart pounding so hard I thought my chest would burst. 1. The girl whimpered, clutching tighter to the older woman. 2. The scraping outside stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. 3. Rick shoved the doors open, and chaos poured in. The world outside was a storm of shrieks, firelight, and shadows. We spilled out of the van, weapons raised, hearts racing. The infected were everywhere, climbing cars, slamming fists against metal, tearing at broken glass. Their heads snapped toward us instantly, and the chase began. Rick swung the bat, caving in a skull with a sickening crack. Lila slashed her knife, blood spraying across her face. Darren froze, his weapon trembling in his grip until Rick barked at him to move. The older woman pulled the girl along, her eyes wide with terror. And me? I ran. Every instinct screamed at me to keep close, to follow Rick's lead, but my eyes darted frantically, searching for it. The creature that had called my name. I spotted it then, perched atop a semi-truck like a king surveying its domain. Its head tilted, that same crooked smile spreading wider as it watched me. It didn't leap into the swarm. It didn't rush us. It just waited, its gaze locked on mine. The others didn't notice. But I did. And deep down, I understood what it meant. It wasn't hunting us at random. It was hunting me. The highway had grown quieter, though not with peace. The silence was the kind that crawled under your skin, filling the spaces between your ribs with unease. Every creak of cooling metal, every shifting shadow beneath the wrecked cars, carried the weight of unseen things watching. The night air had cooled, but sweat still clung to Ryan's back as he gripped the iron pipe in his hand, his knuckles raw from earlier strikes. Maya crouched beside him, her breathing shallow, lips trembling. She clutched a bloodied kitchen knife she'd scavenged from one of the abandoned trucks. Ahead, Alex limped slightly, his jeans soaked with a dark stain near his calf, though he insisted it was just a scrape. No one had questioned him yet. The trio had managed to move past the overturned bus that had blocked their path for hours, only to be greeted with something worse. The highway beyond stretched on like an endless graveyard. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of burned-out cars lay scattered across the road. Some were still smoldering, releasing acrid black smoke that coiled into the night sky. Bodies, both human and inhuman, were draped across the hoods, thrown halfway out of windows, or sprawled in grotesque positions on the pavement. Ryan swallowed hard. We can't stay here. Maya's voice cracked. Where do we go? There's nowhere. Alex stopped, turned slowly, and jabbed a finger at the horizon. There's always somewhere. Look. In the distance, faint lights blinked against the dark sky. They were too steady to be fire and too warm to be headlights. For a fleeting moment, hope sparked in Ryan's chest. Survivors, Alex whispered. Maybe a camp. But Ryan didn't like how quickly Alex had latched onto the idea. His eyes gleamed unnaturally bright, feverish almost, and Ryan noticed again the way his limp worsened with every step. They moved forward cautiously, weaving through the wreckage. The stench of burnt rubber, gasoline, and rotting flesh made breathing a torment. Several times, Maya gagged and pressed her sleeve to her face. Once, a corpse leaning against a steering wheel suddenly twitched, jaws snapping weakly, and Ryan crushed its skull with the pipe before it could make noise. The crack echoed louder than expected, and all three froze, listening. From somewhere deeper within the maze of wreckage came a response. A low groan. Then another. Then dozens. "Run!" Ryan hissed. They bolted, slipping over oil-slick pavement, dodging shattered glass and jagged metal. The groans grew louder, closer, until shapes began pulling themselves from the shadows. Bodies with mangled limbs, milky eyes, and mouths that hung open like broken hinges. Some dragged themselves across the asphalt on ruined legs, others sprinted unnaturally fast, their guttural snarls ripping through the air. Ryan's lungs burned as he ran. Behind him, Maya screamed, a sharp, piercing cry that nearly froze him, but he couldn't look back. Not yet. Not when the swarm was on them. The trio stumbled into a clearing in the wreckage where the highway opened briefly before another cluster of abandoned cars. At the center of the clearing stood a jackknifed 18-wheeler, its trailer split open. Inside, boxes of supplies had spilled out, water bottles, canned goods, blankets. It was a treasure trove, but the sight filled Ryan with dread. "Too convenient," he muttered. Alex, panting, ignored him and rushed forward, tearing open a case of water bottles. "We can't keep running without strength. Just grab what you can." Maya hesitated, her eyes darting to the walls of cars surrounding them. "We're trapped in a bowl," she said, her voice shaking. "If they follow us in here, we're done." Ryan scanned the wreckage and spotted an access ramp leading up to an overpass that crossed above the main highway. "There, high ground." He pointed, but Alex barely looked up from stuffing supplies into his pack. The moans grew louder again. Shadows gathered at the mouth of the clearing. Pale arms reached through broken windows, fingers clawing at the air. "They're here!" Maya screamed. Ryan grabbed her arm, dragging her toward the ramp. "Move. Now!" But Alex didn't follow. He stood in the center of the clearing, the case of bottled water clutched to his chest, staring at the approaching horde. His expression was strange, resigned, almost calm. "Alex!" Ryan shouted. Alex turned slowly. His face was pale, lips quivering. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but instead of words, a wet cough spilled from his throat. Blood sprayed across his chin. Maya gasped. "No." Ryan's stomach dropped. "You're bit." Alex collapsed to his knees, clutching his leg where the bite wound was finally visible. The flesh was blackened, veins spiderwebbing outward like cracks in porcelain. The groans grew deafening now, echoing from all directions. Alex looked up at them, eyes glassy. "Go," he croaked. "Don't let it be for nothing." Ryan hesitated, torn between loyalty and survival. But Maya was already tugging at his arm, sobbing. "We can't, Ryan, we can't, please." And then Alex screamed. Not a human scream, but a guttural, agonized shriek that froze their blood. His body convulsed violently, spine arching, eyes rolling back. The transformation had begun, and it was fast. The swarm surged into the clearing, drawn to Alex's cries. Ryan and Maya ran. They scrambled up the access ramp, slipping on gravel, their legs screaming with exhaustion. Below them, chaos erupted as the horde descended on Alex. His cries twisted into monstrous snarls, blending with the others until Ryan couldn't tell him apart from the rest. When they reached the top of the overpass, Ryan collapsed against the guardrail, gasping for breath. Maya crumpled beside him, sobbing into her hands. Below, the clearing was a writhing pit of bodies tearing each other apart. For a moment, neither spoke. The night pressed heavy around them, filled with the sounds of feeding. Finally, Maya whispered, "He saved us." Ryan stared at the mass below, fists clenched. "No," he said softly. "He just bought us time." They sat in silence, watching as the horde devoured what was left of Alex. The faint lights on the horizon still blinked in the distance, a cruel reminder that hope dangled just out of reach. But the road to it was paved with nightmares, and the night was far from over. The overpass trembled beneath Ryan and Maya's exhausted bodies. Below, the swarm still fed, tearing at what remained of Alex until even the bones seemed to vanish beneath gnashing teeth. The noise was unbearable, a chorus of animal hunger, echoing into the night like a hymn of the damned. Maya clung to the guardrail, rocking back and forth, her whispers barely audible. "We shouldn't have left him. We shouldn't have." Ryan gripped her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. If we stayed, we'd be down there with him. He knew that. His voice cracked, betraying the truth he didn't want to face. Alex hadn't just been their friend, he'd been their compass. Without him, the path forward felt like a cliff edge crumbling beneath their feet. Still, the lights blinked in the distance. Too steady to be a trick of their eyes. Too deliberate to be ignored. "That's our only chance," Ryan said. "If we stop now, we die here." Maya wiped her tears and nodded weakly. Together, they pressed on. The overpass stretched long and empty, the asphalt cracked and littered with forgotten belongings. Suitcases burst open, children's toys scattered, blood smeared in streaks where something had been dragged. Each step echoed with loneliness. At the midpoint, they passed a minivan with shattered windows. Inside, strapped in a car seat, was a toddler's skeleton. A stuffed rabbit lay beside it, its fur matted dark. Maya gagged, turning away, but Ryan forced himself to look. The world they lived in now wasn't just about monsters. It was about reminders like these, frozen moments of terror that no one had survived to erase. Halfway across, they heard it, the shuffle of feet behind them. Both froze. Slowly, Ryan turned. At first, nothing, just the endless stretch of the overpass. Then movement. Figures climbing up from the ramps, one by one, staggering into the moonlight. The horde hadn't been satisfied below. They were following. "Run," Ryan whispered. They sprinted, lungs burning, muscles screaming. The lights ahead grew clearer now, forming shapes, floodlights mounted on tall poles, illuminating a cluster of makeshift walls and barbed wire. It was a camp. A real camp. Maya's sob of relief nearly made her stumble. "We made it. We actually—" Gunfire erupted. The sharp crack of rifles split the air, and Ryan dove, dragging Maya with him behind a rusted car abandoned on the overpass. Bullets tore through the night, dropping the advancing dead in sprays of gore. The camp was alive, and its defenders ruthless. "Help!" Ryan screamed, waving his arms. "We're alive! Don't shoot!" The gunfire ceased abruptly. For a moment, silence hung, broken only by the groans of the wounded undead crawling closer. Then, a voice boomed from a loudspeaker across the distance. "Stay where you are. Don't move." Floodlights swiveled, blinding them. Ryan shielded his eyes, his heart hammering. A metallic clank echoed as a gate opened in the barricade ahead. Figures emerged, men in mismatched armor, helmets, and gas masks, rifles raised. "Search them," one barked. Ryan and Maya obeyed, trembling as rough hands shoved them against the car, patting them down. When the guards were satisfied, they hauled them to their feet. "They're clean," one said. "Then bring them in," came the order. The gate yawned wider, and the two were shoved forward. Inside the barricade, the world looked different. Fires burned in oil drums, casting long shadows across tents and makeshift shacks. Dozens of survivors huddled together, gaunt and hollow-eyed. Children cried softly, their mothers shushing them with desperate patience. The smell of cooking meat wafted from somewhere deeper inside, mingling uneasily with the stench of unwashed bodies. For the first time in days, Ryan felt his chest loosen. They weren't alone anymore. But the relief didn't last. A man stepped forward from the largest tent, his presence commanding immediate silence. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face marked by scars and cold eyes that gleamed in the firelight. He wore a black jacket patched with military insignia, though faded and worn. "I'm Captain Harlow," he said simply. "This is my camp." Ryan nodded quickly. "Thank you for saving us. Out there, we wouldn't have lasted." Harlow studied them with unnerving intensity, then smiled thinly. "Few do. But survival here has rules. You follow them, you live. You break them." His gaze lingered, dark and unblinking. "You won't like the consequences." Maya shivered. "What kind of rules?" Harlow ignored her, snapping his fingers. Two guards dragged a struggling man from the shadows. He screamed, thrashing, until one of the guards ripped his shirt open. There, on his chest, was a bite mark. The camp grew tense, watching. Children clung to their mothers, faces buried. "Rule number 1, Harlow said, his voice calm. No infection allowed inside these walls. He nodded, and without hesitation, a guard raised his rifle and fired. The bitten man collapsed, lifeless, his blood pooling across the dirt. Maya gasped, stumbling back into Ryan's arms. Harlow's smile returned, cold and sharp. "You see. Simple rules. They keep us safe." Ryan forced himself to nod, though bile burned his throat. He had seen death before, but not like this, not so casual. That night, they were given a tent to share with 6 others, strangers with sunken eyes who barely spoke. Ryan lay awake, staring at the thin canvas roof, listening to the distant moans of the undead beyond the barricade. Maya slept fitfully beside him, whimpering in her dreams. He thought of Alex, his screams, his sacrifice, and wondered if this place honored it or mocked it. The next morning, the truth became clearer. The camp was orderly, efficient, but wrong. Guards patrolled constantly, rifles always ready. Survivors were assigned tasks without question, hauling supplies, fortifying walls, scavenging in dangerous zones. Those who refused were beaten. Those who faltered were discarded. And at the center of it all was Harlow, ruling like a king over his crumbling kingdom. Ryan whispered to Maya when they were alone. "This isn't safety. It's a prison." Maya's eyes glistened. "But what else is there? Out there, we'll die." Ryan didn't answer. He didn't have to. Both knew the truth. Survival here came at a cost. A cost that grew steeper by the day. One evening, the guards dragged in a group of new survivors, 3 men and a woman. Dirty, wounded, but alive. Ryan watched from the crowd as Harlow examined them. One of the men begged for food, dropping to his knees. Harlow looked at him with something almost like pity. Then he nodded at a guard. A single gunshot ended the plea. "Too weak," Harlow said simply. "We don't waste resources." Ryan's stomach twisted. The camp wasn't sanctuary. It was a slaughterhouse wearing the mask of safety. That night, he made a decision. "We can't stay," he whispered to Maya, gripping her hand. "We have to leave." Her eyes widened in fear. "Leave? But the horde. Better the monsters out there than the ones in here." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she nodded. They planned carefully. At night, the guards grew lazy, their patrols thin. The gate was reinforced, but the wall had weak spots where metal sheets had been welded hastily. 2 nights later, they made their move. Creeping through the shadows, avoiding the firelight, Ryan led Maya to the wall. His heart thundered in his chest as he pried at the loose sheet of metal, every creak like a scream in the silence. Finally, it gave way, and the cold night air rushed in. But just as they slipped through, a voice cut the dark. "Leaving so soon?" They froze. Harlow stood a few paces away, rifle in hand, flanked by 2 guards. His smile was thin, humorless. "You think you're the first?" he asked. "Everyone thinks they can run. Out there, there's no escape. Out there, the dead don't stop." Ryan tightened his grip on the pipe he still carried. "Better out there than under you." Harlow chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You'll regret that." He raised his rifle, and the world exploded into chaos. From the darkness beyond the wall came a thunderous crash. The barricade buckled as dozens, hundreds, of zombies slammed against it. The noise had drawn them. The wall trembled, and in an instant, the undead poured through the weak spot Ryan had opened. Screams erupted as the camp fell into madness. Guards fired wildly, survivors fled, but the tide was unstoppable. Ryan grabbed Maya's hand. "Run!" They plunged into the night, the horde swallowing the camp behind them. The gunfire, the screams, the cries of children, it all blurred into a single cacophony of despair. When they finally stopped, miles down the road, the night was silent again. Only the moans of distant stragglers followed. Maya collapsed, sobbing. "There's nowhere safe. Nowhere." Ryan looked at her, his face hollow. He thought of Alex, of Harlow, of every face they'd lost along the way. He thought of the endless road stretching ahead. She was right. There was no safe place. No sanctuary. Only the highway. Only survival. Only the knowledge that they were trapped in a world with no escape.